Let me ask you something. What happens when the world's most powerful nations expect silence, but instead they hear a voice that cuts through like thunder? What happens when truth is spoken so sharply, so directly, that no one can look away? That's what happened when Jaishankar spoke in just 60 seconds. In 1 minute, he exposed the problem, challenged the old order, and lit a fire of curiosity. What comes next? When Jaishankar began his 60-second message, the very first thing that set it apart was the refusal to waste a single heartbeat on pleasantries or filler. He didn't stroll into his words. He launched into them with the force of someone who understood that the world was listening, and every second mattered. In a space where leaders often stretch their sentences, pad their language, and bury meaning under diplomatic cushions, his approach was like cutting through fog with a blade. The silence of conformity had been the normal posture for too long, nations waiting, watching, and hesitating, while larger powers shaped the conversation. But in those 60 seconds he shattered that mold. He proved that silence is not the same as strength. Silence, when driven by fear or hesitation, is weakness dressed up as patience. To break the silence is to reclaim control, to declare without hesitation that the voice of a nation matters as much, if not more, than the ones used to dominating the room. What made this moment so powerful was not just the words, but the timing. He didn't wait for approval, applause, or the comfort of allies nodding along. He spoke when it was least expected, and that made his message unavoidable. In politics and diplomacy, timing is everything. Break the silence at the wrong moment, and you look reckless. Hold it too long, and you become irrelevant. But he struck at the precise instant when the room was heavy with expectation, and the shock of his words carried 10 times the weight they might have otherwise. It was a reminder that true leadership is not measured by the length of your speech, but by your ability to say what others cannot when it matters most. The deeper meaning of this act was that he redefined the battlefield. For too long, the global stage has been dominated by narratives built around old centers of power, where some voices were amplified and others muted. By breaking that silence, he shifted the frame of the entire conversation. It was no longer about the old order dictating the terms. It was about a new voice refusing to be sidelined. He reminded everyone that the global stage doesn't belong to a select few, but to those brave enough to step forward and take their place on it. People underestimate the power of clarity, but in that moment, clarity was everything. There was no hidden agenda in the way he spoke, no convoluted layers to decode. It was straightforward, raw, and unshakable. That's why it pierced through the noise. The world is full of leaders who talk for hours and say nothing. He spoke for 1 minute and said everything. That is the essence of breaking the silence, not just speaking up, but speaking so sharply that the silence afterward feels louder than the words themselves. He showed that breaking silence doesn't mean chaos, it means courage. It means refusing to stand by while others decide your future. It means understanding that when the stakes are high, a whisper is not enough. You have to roar. And in that roar, in those few sentences, Jaishankar didn't just fill a silence. He redefined what strength looks like in front of the entire world. When Jaishankar moved into the second wave of his message, it was not with hesitation or compromise. It was with precision. He held up a mirror to the world and forced it to look at itself without filters. Hypocrisy is a word often whispered but rarely shouted in international halls. Nations that claim to be champions of justice, equality, and cooperation are often the first to bend rules, twist narratives, and impose double standards when it suits their interests. And while most leaders tiptoe around these contradictions, afraid to upset the balance of power, he pointed directly at them with no apology. That act alone shifted the temperature in the room, because it takes a rare kind of boldness to call out what everyone sees but few dare to acknowledge. The strength of this moment came from its simplicity. He didn't need statistics or endless examples. The hypocrisy was already evident to anyone paying attention. The same voices that preached freedom often ignored it when inconvenient. The same nations that demanded accountability often shielded themselves from it. The very powers that condemned others for protectionist policies were the first to use those same policies when their own industries or dominance was threatened. By shining a light on this, he exposed the gap between what is said on podiums and what is done behind closed doors. And once you expose that gap, you strip away the authority those nations used to command the world. This was not just about confrontation, it was about courage. To challenge hypocrisy is to risk being isolated, criticized, even punished by those in power. Yet he showed that silence is more dangerous than speaking up. Silence allows hypocrisy to thrive unchecked, to become the norm. By breaking that silence, he signaled that India will not play the role of a quiet observer. Instead, it will stand as a voice that questions, that challenges, and that refuses to bow to convenient narratives. And that voice does not belong to India alone. It speaks for every nation tired of being dictated to by those who do not follow their own rules. What made his stance even more powerful was the calmness with which he delivered it. He didn't shout, he didn't exaggerate, and yet the message cut deeper than anger ever could. Hypocrisy thrives in ambiguity, in the assumption that no one will have the courage to highlight it directly. But by naming it, by speaking the truth plainly, he made it impossible to ignore. The world was forced to listen, forced to reconcile with the fact that their actions no longer went unnoticed. And when such truth is spoken, it creates a ripple effect. Others begin to find their own courage, others begin to question, and the very structure of dominance starts to weaken. In that brief moment, he reminded the world that leadership is not about hiding behind polite phrases or shielding yourself from discomfort. Real leadership is about holding a mirror up, even if what it reflects is uncomfortable, even if it breaks the illusion of perfection. He left no room for doubt. If you preach fairness, you must live by fairness. If you demand discipline, you must practice discipline. If you call for accountability, you cannot escape it. And once those words were out, the air in the room shifted, because everyone knew the truth could not be unsaid. When the message turned toward India itself, there was no hesitation, no modest downplaying, and no defensive stance. The words carried certainty, as if declaring a fact that had already been written in stone. India will not be told what to do, and India will not follow a script written by someone else. For decades, the world had grown used to seeing India through the lens of others, measured, compared, or judged by standards it did not create. But in that single, condensed moment, JAISHANKAR flipped the frame. He placed India firmly at the center of the global stage, not as a participant waiting for instructions, but as a decisive actor shaping the narrative. This wasn't a request for recognition. It was an assertion of reality. The effect of this shift was immediate. In a hall where the same old powers often dominate the spotlight, the declaration stood out like a flare in the night sky. India was no longer content to be described in the future tense, a rising power, an emerging force, a potential leader. That language was dismissed with a single stroke. The message was clear. India is already a force, right here, right now, and in claiming that space, he forced the world to adjust its gaze. It was no longer about waiting for India to arrive. It was about acknowledging that India had already arrived. The strength of his words came from confidence rooted in reality. India today is not the same as it was decades ago, struggling for footing or searching for validation. Its economy is growing at one of the fastest rates in the world. Its technology sector is pushing boundaries that once belonged only to the West. Its diplomatic influence stretches across continents, balancing alliances without bending to pressure. Its military strength is not just about numbers, but about strategy, resilience, and readiness. By speaking with clarity, he was not exaggerating India's position. He was stating what many already knew but few had dared to say aloud in such a blunt and undeniable way. What made this moment resonate was not just national pride, but the tone of independence. He wasn't saying India would lead by mimicking others or by submitting to the frameworks already in place. He was declaring that India would carve its own path, make its own rules, and pursue its own interests without apology. This kind of self-assurance unsettles those who are used to obedience, those who prefer a world where nations take instructions rather than give them, and in unsettling them, he showed that India's strength lies not only in material progress, but in the refusal to be dictated to. The presence in his voice carried a weight that reminded everyone of a larger truth. History doesn't wait for permission. Nations don't rise because others allow them to. They rise because they choose to. And India's choice was made clear in those seconds. It will stand firm. It will not apologize for its ambition, and it will not shrink itself to fit into anyone else's shadow. This was the moment the room realized that India was not just participating in the world order, it was helping to rewrite it. There was a moment in his words where the tone sharpened into something even stronger, something unshakable. It was the rejection of apologies. Too often, nations are expected to defend their choices, to explain why they build strength, or to justify why they seek independence. But in those 60 seconds, Jaishankar made it clear, there would be no apologies for being strong, and no excuses for taking bold action. This was not arrogance, it was conviction. For too long, strength from certain nations was framed as dangerous, while the same strength in others was celebrated as leadership. He dismantled that false narrative with a simple truth. India's strength is not a threat to the world. It is a stabilizing force, a balance that prevents dominance from becoming tyranny. What gave his words power was the discipline behind them. He wasn't talking about reckless might or empty demonstrations of force. He was speaking about strength built on years of endurance, sacrifice, and relentless effort. Strength that comes not from bullying others, but from mastering oneself. Strength that does not ask for validation, but stands tall in silence until the moment it must speak. When he said India would not apologize, he was rejecting the idea that dignity must be explained, that sovereignty must be defended, or that ambition must be softened to make others comfortable. The message was direct. Strength is natural, it is necessary, and it does not require permission. This shift was important because apologies weaken the ground beneath a nation. Every time a leader tries to justify progress or downplay confidence, it sends a signal that they are still seeking approval. But approval is a trap. It binds you to the expectations of those who benefit from your hesitation. By rejecting that dynamic, Jaishankar freed India from the role of the apologetic power. He showed that confidence is not aggression, that clarity is not confrontation, and that refusing to bow is not the same as refusing to cooperate. It is possible to engage with the world on your own terms without kneeling to it. The deeper meaning here lies in the psychology of strength. When a nation declares its intent without excuse, it forces others to respect it, even those who may not agree. Respect does not come from weakness, it comes from the refusal to bend under pressure. That's why his words landed so heavily. They reminded the world that India would not be cornered into defensive positions, would not shrink itself to fit into outdated hierarchies, and would not beg for acceptance from those who fear its rise. Instead, India would stand tall, knowing that true strength speaks for itself, What made the moment unforgettable was that it wasn't shouted with fury or decorated with exaggeration. It was said plainly, calmly, almost like stating a fact that could not be denied. And that calmness carried the greatest weight of all, because it was the calm of certainty, a certainty that comes only when strength is real, not borrowed, not fabricated, not temporary. The world saw in that instant that India's position is not a performance. It is rooted, it is disciplined, and it is permanent. When the focus shifted toward the balance of power, the atmosphere in the room became heavier. There was no mistaking the weight of his words, because they carried a truth that many sensed but few wanted to acknowledge. The old global balance is shifting. It is not an abstract idea anymore. It is a living reality, and his words turned that reality into something undeniable. For decades, certain nations assumed their dominance would be permanent, their leadership uncontested, their voices the loudest in every hall. But the tone in those 60 seconds shattered that illusion. He reminded everyone that no empire, no order, no dominance lasts forever. Power moves, it evolves, and right now it is moving toward new centers, with India at the heart of that transformation. What gave his message force was the way he refused to frame change as distant or hypothetical. He didn't say India will rise, he said it already is. This was not prophecy, it was a report from the present. The balance of power had already begun to tilt, and ignoring it would not stop it. The declaration landed hard because it forced nations to confront a future they could no longer deny. The audience wasn't being asked to imagine possibility. They were being told to accept reality, and that reality was clear. India is not waiting for permission, India is not waiting for recognition, and India is not waiting for history to catch up. The shift is happening now. The deeper strength of his words lay in the calm inevitability of them. A balance of power is not reshaped in one day, but through consistent discipline, growth, and resilience. He did not speak about dramatic confrontation, he spoke about steady transformation. That is what makes it unstoppable. The old world order thrives on fear, but his words showed no fear, only certainty. And certainty, when spoken with clarity, is more powerful than threats or posturing. It is the voice of someone who knows that time itself is on their side. For those listening, the discomfort was obvious. A shifting balance means a loss of control for some, and control is not surrendered easily. But his statement did not seek to comfort or soften that truth. It was delivered with precision. The balance is changing, whether you like it or not. And in that directness he claimed authority. Authority not borrowed from alliances or treaties, but from the undeniable reality of India's rise. The world was being told not just to hear it, but to adjust to it. That shift in tone carried an unspoken challenge. The powers of yesterday could cling to the past, or they could adapt to the present. If they resisted, they would find themselves left behind, chasing shadows of influence that no longer exist. If they adapted, they would recognize India not as a junior partner, but as an equal force shaping the future. Either way, the balance of power was no longer a debate. It was already underway. And that was the genius of his words. They didn't ask the world to agree, they made the world face what was already unfolding before its eyes. As his words moved toward their final strike, the message turned from sharp observation to undeniable truth. Change is unstoppable. He spoke it in a way that stripped away all illusions of control. You can delay it, you can resist it, you can even deny it, but you cannot stop it. That single idea hung in the air like a challenge, not just to the leaders in the room, but to the systems they defended. Old powers cling to their dominance as if it were eternal, but history proves again and again that no structure stands forever. Empires rise and fall, orders are built and replaced, voices once ignored become the ones that define the era. In those 60 seconds, he reminded the world that this cycle is not just history. It is happening right now. The power of his words came from their inevitability. He did not speak as if offering an opinion, but as if declaring a fact already written in time. That tone was impossible to ignore because it carried no uncertainty. Change was not coming someday. It was already here. Every act of resistance against it was like trying to hold back the tide with bare hands. This gave his message the force of nature itself. You can fight it, but you will be exhausted. You can deny it, but you will look foolish. The only rational choice is to recognize it and adapt to it. And in this era, that change carries India forward as one of the central forces of the new order. What struck the audience most was the clarity in his defiance. He didn't soften the blow by suggesting that everyone would be comfortable with this transition. He acknowledged, without directly saying it, that many would fear it, but fear is not enough to stop momentum. Fear slows the weak, but it sharpens the strong. That is what made his words so cutting. They expose the truth that those who try to block change only reveal their own insecurity. The ones who understand it, embrace it, and prepare for it are the ones who will thrive in the future. This message wasn't only about India. It was about a larger awakening. He was speaking to every nation that has ever been told to wait its turn, every society that has been treated as secondary, every voice that has been muted. His words carried the force of representation for all of them. They implied that the unstoppable future does not belong to a few gatekeepers. It belongs to those with the courage to claim it. And once that truth is spoken aloud, it cannot be silenced again. It becomes a seed planted in the minds of millions, a seed that will grow whether others like it or not. The final impact of this message was the silence that followed. Because when someone declares inevitability with such conviction, there is no argument that can dismantle it. The old world order had just been told its time was running out. The future is not waiting. The future is already walking, already building, already roaring forward, and those who stand in its way will not stop it. They will be swept aside by it. So, what did we witness in those 60 seconds? We saw a leader who didn't bend, who didn't apologize, who didn't hide behind soft words. We saw a voice that broke the silence, tore through hypocrisy, placed India at the center, declared strength without excuses, revealed the shifting balance of power, and reminded the world that change is unstoppable. That's not just a speech, that's a signal that the world will never look the same again. Now the question is not about what he said. It's about what we do with it. Do we keep living under the old rules, clinging to structures that are already crumbling? Or do we step into the new era with courage? This is the moment to stop doubting, stop apologizing, and stop waiting for permission. This is the moment to stand tall, to take ownership of our future, and to prove with action that words are only the beginning. Each of us has a role in building the world that is coming. Don't just watch history, shape it. I want to thank you for listening with open minds and strong hearts. The fact that you're here, the fact that you care, shows that you're already part of the change. Remember, speeches end, but impact begins when the audience carries the message forward. So take this energy with you, carry it into your choices, your work, your vision. Because together, we are not waiting for the future, we are building it. Thank you, stay strong, stay fearless, and never ever forget, the world listens when you refuse to be silent.